Joy Drive on Joy 94.9 FM in Melbourne, Joy on your digital radio, iHeartRadio, TuneIn.com or the Joy app. No matter where you are, you can always take Em and Warren with you.
Suzy Wrong, good afternoon.
Hi there, from your secret federal minister of angry old queens.
Did you appoint yourself as a minister?
Secretly, but obviously not so secret anymore. It's all out in the open.
You got caught out, Suzy.
Yeah, but that's okay. I don't think I got paid very much money. Do you think he got paid extra? Do you think that's why he did it?
No, I think
Surely
it was power
not.
grab,
Just power grabbing.
I reckon.
Right.
I mean, it's
The
pretty
man who-
bad, isn't it? It's like me saying to M, I'm also my own co-host, and not telling M. It's like, how
Yeah,
disrespectful
like
to your
the
colleagues.
the secret producer of the program.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Just
Yeah.
to back up. I don't know. I think it was very disrespectful to his colleagues and to the Melbourne. We're talking about the ex-Prime Minister, of course.
Yeah,
But
and
we-
then say that none of that is your responsibility.
Yeah, that's right. And now he has to apologise. Anyway, I'm glad you're upfront about it, Suzy. What other ministries have you labelled yourself with?
I'm always a minister of glamour, in
Yes.
case anyone didn't notice.
That is not a secret, Suzy.
Yeah, I'm the official glamour police.
Amazing. So good.
Now, we are talking about the Alexander Ball, which is streaming on SBS On Demand. What's it about, Suzy?
In the tradition of Paris is Burning from 1990 and more recent programs like Legendary, My House and Pose, the Alexander Ball, now streaming on SBS, offers insight into the world of voguing balls and the houses of queer people that thrive in those colourful microcosms. What's unique about the Alexander Ball documentary is that we're no longer in New York. This time, the story takes place in Mianjin, also known as Brisbane, with a focus on the House of Alexander, which has as its head the Divine Mother Ella Ganza, who's also one of the pioneers of the Australian ballroom scene. We see rehearsals and preparation for their big night, known as the Alexander Ball, from which the documentary borrows its name. A substantial portion of the film features footage from the event, which is highly satisfying, with beautiful queer bodies of all kinds demonstrating talent, exuberance, and extraordinary courage. It is a fascinating and inspiring watch. The film is only 30 minutes long, which means we don't get to delve too deeply into the lives of these personalities, but on the bright side, we are spared having to sit too much inside trauma narratives, as is the convention with films of this genre. The Alexander Ball on SBS is celebratory and affirming. The Alexander House, it seems, is made up of people from roots in Samoa, Tonga, the Philippines, and Sri Lanka. So for viewers who may be queer people of colour in Australia, this is a rare moment for us to see ourselves reflected in what is still the very white landscape of LGBTQIA+ representation on this land. Em and Warren, isn't it so interesting to see how the ballroom culture is being imported from the States?
Absolutely. I actually do think that this is such a great introduction to ballroom culture generally, and certainly if you've not seen it before, it really does break it down well. At the beginning of this 30-minute film, you do literally get sort of the definitions of what ballroom is, and then they also tell what serving face means, and all these different elements of ballroom that if you weren't familiar, they really do break it down quite well. And I do love that it's being imported to Australia because, having watched some shows with you, Suzy, you can see the benefit of people finding their community and being able to celebrate the way that they dance, the way that they move, their faces. And so it's nice to think that it's going to come and be celebrated in Australia as well.
Yeah, it's a way for us to celebrate what the other people are rejecting. It is a space in which we create a community, that we celebrate one another. And it's wonderful that, in this documentary and in other ones that we've seen, especially I remember very clearly from the old Paris is Burning documentary being so astonished by the number of trophies that were given out. I was like, why are there so many trophies? And I guess it is about diversity, isn't it? It's about there's all kinds of beauty, there's all kinds of talent, and in here, no matter where you come from, no matter who you are accepted, you are celebrated. And I think that is just the most beautiful thing.
Suzy, I think you summed it up really well. I mean, I really enjoyed watching it, and when they were showing scenes from the ball, and you're right, there were all different sorts of people up there, all different shapes and sizes, different bodies, and they were in their element, they were having fun, they were being authentic, they were being themselves. And how refreshing to see that from, having grown up in a gay culture where, your body perfect, your tops are off and you all look exactly the same. And something that I learned out of this that I didn't realise, even though we've watched Pose and other series, is that the balls were created out of a prejudice from the queer community. I thought it was just prejudice from the rest of society, but I was just thinking afterwards, we've got a lot to acknowledge and answer for, haven't we? I mean, we it's almost like, the ball is the exact opposite of how we've been behaving as an LGBTIQ plus community. And I know this will upset a few people, but I think we need to own that and agree that we haven't been the nicest community to ourselves necessarily.
Yeah, it has been decades of that. I mean, part of it is, the activism that we engaged in. Part of the 80s, 90s activism was that we needed to show mainstream society that we were quote unquote normal. And as a result of presenting that face of being normal in places like Australia, America, etc., it became that we had to look ultra healthy in a very conformist way. So what's happened over the last few decades is what being gay meant in places like Australia is that you were either a jock or a twink. That was all that was allowed in the scene, so called, and so everything was sidelined. But and unfortunately, we never had a ballroom scene in Australia until very recently, I believe. I think it's only happened within the last less than 10 years, that we had the benefit of a ballroom scene, that other people who didn't fit those narrow definitions of gay and queer beauty in Australia have a space now to express themselves. And this isn't really only about people of color. You do see a few white people in this program, and I think this kind of redefining who we are is healthy for everyone. And just like we talk about toxic masculinity, it's so prevalent, isn't it, when we look back, as you did, Warren, about how we had tried to establish ourselves as a community, as an identity. So much of it was toxic. So much was that kind of masculinity that we didn't realize that we were doing.
And I feel like we're getting to a point, Em and Suzy, where we need to heal this behaviour of shaming others that we have grown up with and we've come out with. I think as a community, it's something that we need to heal so that we can move on. And I was quite saddened when I was watching it. I don't know if you both remember, but they were talking about how they were scared to be themselves. And some of them want to just transition in peace. And, they also talked about how they can never, replace the families that they've lost for being themselves. I was quite touched by that. And I thought, well, it's a 30-minute documentary, but it gets you thinking about what it's like to be partaking in these balls. And I really hope that the ballroom culture is embraced by all of us in the LGBTIQ plus community. I hope it's not shamed by anyone. I think it's a really, really good opportunity to see people being themselves without, being scared of being rejected, and we can all embrace it and have such a good time with it. And I really hope that's what happens, even though it is a few decades from when it first started in New York.
Yeah, I think the ballroom scene, together with the huge success of RuPaul's Drag Race, the entire franchise, I think it is changing queer identity a lot everywhere into something that's, it's not perfect by any means, but it's definitely a lot better than what it used to be, the narrow definitions that we had. Like what RuPaul's doing with the show, I don't think it was ever RuPaul's intention, but what's happened is through the years of success of this program is that it's it's just expanded the definition of drag, and through that the definition of our identities. Our identities in a community that has the capacity to understand diversity, has the capacity to understand what it means to be ostracized, and therefore learn to be loving and accepting of differences. This is what we have preached for decades and decades, and it only seems that it's only now that we're starting to implement that spirit within our own communities.
Absolutely. There was a really beautiful and for me quite poignant moment where Eleganza was talking just before the ball about, what was going to happen that night and the way that ballroom makes her and her family, her ballroom family feel. And she quoted, "Today we're not the other, we're the ones." Oh, and I really, that particular line, and it was such an organic moment where she was just sort of talking about the show that was to come. That was just it almost makes me tear up now. It's such a powerful moment because that's exactly what that ball gave to everyone on stage that night. For that, however long it was, 2 hours, 3 hours, they got to be on stage. They got to express themselves openly and honestly in their whole 100% authentic self. And isn't that all what we aspire to do and be able to do and openly do and happily do? Like, yes, you're the one for that moment. And like, I so wish that that everyone that was on stage that night can, and that's I guess what we want in life, for everyone to be able to just really openly and authentically be themselves.
A significant difference between the programs that we have these days, like including Alexander Ball and Legendary and RuPaul's Drag Race, and the difference between this and the old stuff like Paris is Burning from 1990 is that we are centering ourselves now. We're learning to center ourselves. We are the one, we are not the other. So we are talking to ourselves. We are creating these stories to form a language to understand one another. This isn't about catering to an imagined mainstream. It's not about catering to straight people, for example. Paris is Burning had a lot of language that was about explaining to other people. Granted, it's a completely different type, a different time and culture, but it had to spend a lot of time to explain to people outside of the culture what that scene, that ballroom scene in the 80s in New York was, because it just kind of took itself to be talking to people that were not inside that scene. But these days we have the freedom and the capacity to make programs, make films like this where we are talking to ourselves within the community, which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
Suzy, I know you said, it's a change from seeing the trauma of these people's lives. I do have to admit though, the half an hour was really good. It was very quick. And I encourage everyone to watch the Alexander Ball on SBS On Demand. But I did miss finding out a little bit about each of the individuals in there, particular, Eleganza as well. What's their history? What have they been through? And that was just purely out of curiosity. I would like to know what's behind them and what really makes them up and what makes them, the person that they are today, which is their authentic self. And that would be nice to hear. Not necessarily essential, but it would be good, maybe future follow-ups.
Yeah, there were a few seconds of many of her children, and all of them were so attractive. I'm like, wow, these are really hot people. I want to see them. And you could imagine it being a long series, definitely a feature, and that would have been great. But, we don't understand all the, financial constraints that these people have in making films like these. I imagine it's very hard to make stories, documentary films that are sort of specific to our culture. I don't think there's a lot of money available for that. So for a 30-minute work, I thought it gave us a lot. It gave us a lot.
Also, isn't that the perfect review? Like, I wanted to see more. It wasn't like I wanted to switch off because it was terrible. It was like, actually, I want more. Yeah. So that's I feel like a really good review.
And I suppose we've got, in Pose, we had the stories behind them as well. I thought it was great. Do you know, is the ballroom scene, is there a Melbourne one? Is there a Sydney one? Is it starting to take off more?
There are. And I would encourage you to seek them out and find a way to get involved.
Absolutely.
I would love to.
I can't dance.
I can't either, but I'd love to go and see it. I mean,
I'm sure you can stand there and clap your hands and cheer.
Yeah, what an amazing time and what a privilege to be able to see these people perform.
Yeah. I think that would be lovely if we could all find, especially if we live in the cities,
Yeah.
occasions like this to get involved with.
Absolutely. Susie, we really enjoyed it. So, as Warren mentioned, if you do get a chance, 30 minutes, the Alexander Ball SBS On Demand, we highly recommend it.
Definitely. What are we watching for next week, Susie?
Next week, we go to Amazon Prime Video for the film Anything's Possible, about a trans girl in high school and the boy who dares to ask her out on a date. It's directed by Billy Porter from Pose, so I'm really looking forward to that.
So Amazon Prime, Anything's Possible.
That's right. And I'll see you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday, Susie.